The Assembly Committee on Government Affairs will come to order. Mr. Secretary, please call roll.
Assemblywoman Anderson. Assemblywoman Black. Assemblywoman Brown May. Assemblywoman Considine. Assemblywoman Dickman. Assemblywoman Duran. Assemblyman Ellison. Assemblywoman Martinez. Assemblyman Matthews. Assemblyman MacArthur. Assemblywoman Thomas. Assemblywoman Torres. Chair Flores.
Present. Please let the record reflect. And who are we missing? Is that Assemblywoman Considine? Please let the record reflect that Assemblywoman Considine is absent, excused. And Mr. Secretary, please mark her present as she makes her way into the committee. Members, we have 2 items on the agenda today, and for the presenters, may the 4th be with you. As we anticipate a lot of questions for the committee. And we'll take the items in the order they appear, but just for some quick house cleaning. And also I want to remind the members that we will be doing our committee picture at the conclusion of today's meeting. We'll be meeting right outside in front by the steps. And then we'll make our way to our designated picture location. But I say that because I want to make sure that nobody runs off on us and you missed that order and that your staff is aware. We have Senate Bill 77 and Senate Bill 283. I do want to remind members to please make sure that you are not logged in on Zoom and in the committee at the same time. For those of you who will be testifying today, please make sure that you state your name for the record after each time to ensure that you help our staff who's behind the scenes and keeping minutes of everything. And then we'll be doing public comment at the conclusion of today's meeting, as we typically do. And with that, we'll go ahead and open up the hearing for Senate Bill 77. Good morning and welcome, sir.
Good morning, Chairman Flores, members of the Assembly Government Affairs Committee. My name is JJ Goykachi. I'm the chair of the Eureka County Board of County Commissioners. There in Carson City with you this morning is Jake Tibbetts, Eureka County's Natural Resource Manager. I'm going to provide just a few introductory remarks and then I'll turn it over to Mr. Tibbetts. I will remain on to answer any questions that you guys may have. SB 77 is a bill that was brought forward through the Interim Committee on Public Lands. The reason for it is, as you're all aware, Nevada has a vast majority of federally managed lands, in excess of 87%. Our intent with this bill is not to somehow undermine or skirt a government in sunshine policy, if you will. It's to do just the opposite. Where we're currently at with the process of any county or even state public body that wants to participate in the NEPA process, you're unable to do so as a complete body. You sign an MOU with the federal agency, and then it's usually a non-elected or appointed staff member and maybe one elected official from that elected body that is able to sit down in discussions with our federal partners. We share information, we talk about what our county policy is, and then as that document is turned into an actual public document, it goes from being administrative draft to public, then it comes across the dais, the entire body acts upon it, and it becomes public. This is really unfair, quite honestly, to your elected officials, to our elected officials, and to the constituents that we represent. I have been fortunate enough to represent Eureka County for the last 9 years in most of the NEPA processes that we do, but that's unfair. Unfortunate and unfair to the other 2 county commissioners who share that governing board with me. It is also unfair to individuals like Mr. Tibbetts, and there are many natural resource managers and staff like him in the state of Nevada that are often put in that situation where they must be carrying out these acts with our federal partners, sharing what our policy is, sharing that information back and forth. And what we want to do with this bill is be able to go into a closed session to where that elected body can actually sit down and discuss amongst the entire elected body with staff who will still be participating with our federal partners, what information we're sharing, what obstacles we may see, because in the end, we want the best possible product that alleviates as many of the concerns and conflicts as we have with our county master plan and those of the federal agencies. You're probably going to hear they're trying to pull something shady. Members of the committee, I can tell you right now that that is farthest from our intent. We want to be open and transparent, and we really think that Nevada's open meeting law in this regard is actually having an opposite effect from what it was intended to do. So you're going to wonder why a closed session. That again is mandated by the MOU that you sign with the federal agency. You are not able to disclose any of that information publicly per federal regulation until it becomes a public draft. So with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Tibbetts. He'll walk through some more nuances of the actual language in the bill, and I know he'll have a lot more information, and then we will stand for questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Jake Tibbetts again, Natural Resource Manager for Eureka County. And thanks for the opportunity to travel from a galaxy far, far away from Eureka today. So SB 77, the Chairman Gokachia did cover the high points of it very well. I want to step back there and just let the committee know the reason why the federal agencies, they require a memorandum of understanding or a memorandum of agreement for any state or local or tribal entity to enter into a NEPA, which is the National Environmental Policy Act, so a process to be a cooperating agency. So that's allowed through federal law and regulation, and it actually mandates federal agencies to have those state and local agencies with special expertise or jurisdiction by law to be at the table. But what happens is the Federal Freedom of Information Act, there's an exemption under the FOIA, Federal Freedom of Information Act, and it's Exemption 5. And it allows federal agencies to withhold information that's considered pre-decisional or deliberative. So with that, various federal agencies from Department of Defense agencies, land management agencies, others have moved forward with regulations to clarify their specific regulations in adopting that Freedom of Information Act Exemption 5. So federal regulations, as we sit here right now, require counties, I'm going to use counties as an example, it'd be any state agency as well. You're required to sign a memorandum of understanding to even be at the table. And in that memorandum of understanding, there is a requirement that the cooperating agency does not discuss in public venues, does not disclose that pre-decisional and deliberative information. So as Chairman Gokachia mentioned, it means that our public bodies cannot meet with the federal agencies as a body. So you end up selecting one county commissioner or a staff person, and it really diminishes the ability of Nevada to participate. We're a public land state. We have a huge amount of federal land, and to diminish our ability to participate in federal processes really hamstrings representation of those citizens that our elected officials are meant to represent. So again, we're not trying to undermine government in the sunshine. It does seem at face value, I will fully agree that it seems inconsistent. It seems very inconsistent, a knee-jerk reaction to call a new NEPA, or National Environmental Policy Act, open meeting law exemption an improvement in transparent government. But we believe that's exactly what this does. It allows, as it stands right now, so what happens if this bill doesn't go through? I think that's an important thing. The National Environmental Policy Act has been around for a long time. I've been in Eureka County for 13 years. I can tell you the county's been very engaged in these processes, and you'll say, well, why now? What matters? Well, I don't know why now, other than bringing forward that we've been very hamstrung. The whole time I've been in Eureka, it's been a very difficult process because often our public bodies, they're not the same person. We elect multiple people to represent multiple constituencies. So having one county commissioner or one person there, they're not necessarily representing the full interest of the public. And I find myself as a staff member trying to work. I have a hard time often advocating for the interests of the public because the public body themselves may be on, the members of that public body may be on different sides of a certain issue. So an unelected staff member or one member of the public body can be actively engaged as it is right now, but there's no assurance that they're representing the interests of the constituents in these processes. I also want to point out that there's checks and balances in place. So as I mentioned, the federal government agencies are required by law to include state and local agencies and tribal governments that have special expertise or jurisdiction by law. That's the specific language from NEPA. And every single NEPA process that I've been involved in for at least the last 13 years has had a broad array of other state agencies and federal agencies that are also cooperating agencies. These processes aren't being done in a vacuum. They're not secretive. All the cooperating agencies are at the table. So on every single NEPA process that I've been involved in, there's been the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency has been a cooperating agency. The Nevada Department of Wildlife has been a cooperating agency on every single one of those. On many of those, we'll have like the state sagebrush ecosystem technical team that's also at the table, the National Park Service, depending, and other federal agencies as well, if there's something with Forest Service. So there's many people involved in this behind the scenes, and that's going on right now. Again, those agencies are having these non-open meetings regardless of the public body being there, because they're not there under without breaking open meeting law. Also want to note that when the final NEPA product, so it's an environmental impact statement or an environmental assessment, so EIS or an EA, when those become available for the public, they're put out in draft form. The public is able to review those documents, and then they're able to provide comment. The federal agencies then weigh that public comment, and then they make changes to the document according to that before they put out a final document and sign a decision. When they do sign a decision, they put out what's called an administrative record. And the federal agencies put in that administrative record for the public to see everything they considered in making their decision. So any influence a public body would have in that decision is put out in the administrative record. It's open for everybody to see. It is public record. Our intent, again, is not for boards to make final decisions behind closed doors. We're advocating to be able to meet and exchange information. If you look at the bill, it talks about the public body meeting to hold discussions. Okay. So again, I think maybe this is a good time, Mr. Chair, to quickly step through the bill. So it's a fairly simple bill. Section 1 is the meat of the bill, and it says the public body that has entered into a memorandum of understanding or agreement with the federal agency under the National Environmental Policy Act may hold a closed meeting to engage in pre-decisional and deliberative discussions. Okay? And it's on the subject defined within that memorandum or agreement. I will note that the memorandum of understanding, memorandum of agreement is approved by the public body in a public meeting, and the contents of that are available through both public records law, and it is placed on an agendized meeting. There are restrictions of when this can take place under the bill, that the public body can only have those closed meetings during the period, that truly pre-decisional and deliberative period before the federal agency releases the product. So once the document is released in the draft form to the public, and it starts that comment period, those are always, they're at a minimum for like an environmental impact statement. It's a 30-day comment period. They can be more. But once that's released, there is no authority under this bill to have any more of those closed meetings. And then these closed meetings could only occur if the federal agency requires those discussions to be kept confidential. So if you don't have a memorandum of understanding that says that it's required to be confidential, then this would not kick in. So we want to make sure our public bodies are informed. They can have the necessary conversations with their constituents so they have an understanding of what's going on. And especially when that document becomes available, so when the public gets the document and they're coming to their elected officials and say, I'm concerned about this, what's going on here, that public body will have been informed and know exactly what went into that process. We'll note that, if you look back at the record of this bill, in the previous draft, there was a whole section about the public records law. We heard a lot of testimony related to public records after the hearing and before the passage on the other side. We worked with various constituencies, or groups that came out in opposition, and we came up with this amendment. I will note that even this bill in the first reprint is much tighter than even the amendment that the committee passed. The amendment the committee passed talked about the public body being able to have these non-public meetings right up until the date the federal agency signs the decision. This has tightened that up, that it's now right up until when it becomes a public release document. And at that point, these open meetings, non-open meetings cannot occur anymore. We'll note, many in opposition have and may say today, they'll point out to various other states that haven't implemented a similar exemption under the open meeting law for NEPA. And I'll point out that I've done research into some of the other states as well, and I don't find a specific NEPA open meeting law requirement. But I want to again point the committee that we are a public land state with 85% federal land, and the National Environmental Policy Act applies much more in Nevada than many other states. But I'll also point out that many other states, including some of those that neighbor us, do have clarity within their public records law about them being able to have either called executive sessions, closed meetings, whatever their specific term is, to discuss documents that are otherwise protected under federal law. And I can point you to some of those states. So they, in a way, are able to do something I think that's even more open, to allow those documents to be distributed between the county commission. They can then have a closed meeting to discuss that specific document. And we heard loud and clear that folks did not want to implicate and touch the public records law in this bill. And so we didn't go that route that many of the other states have gone. We thought the best way to do it was through having discussions under an exemption under the open meeting law. And on Nellis, I will point out that there's some written testimony. I will note that towards the middle to the end of the testimony, I've actually cut and pasted word for word language from various federal regulations to show you how these federal agencies require these MOUs, and you have to sign one before you can even be at the table, and they require you not to disclose this information. So there's the Department of Interior regulations that would cover everything from the Bureau of Land Management, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and the National Park Service. There's the Forest Service handbook, Council on Environmental Quality, which is the lead that's over the National Environmental Policy Act at the national level. So if you have any questions on that, you can see those. And then I've also pasted, put little screenshots word for word from various MOUs we've had with various agencies over the years, so you can see what types of language the federal agencies are requiring in these MOUs, and there's including stuff in there from the Department of Defense. And then finally, there's a letter at the very end of the packet where years ago our county commission did discuss in an open meeting concerns about a mining project that was being put forward and some of the water concerns of that. They discussed that in an open meeting. It was picked up and placed in a local newspaper, and we received this letter from the Bureau of Land Management admonishing us for discussing that information and basically saying, you're breaking the federal law, you're breaking the memorandum of understanding. So with that, again, thank you for your time, and I'm happy to stand for any questions you may have.
And thank you both for your presentation. Mr. Tibbetts, you had the courageousness to say this bill is fairly simple, but if you only knew the power of the dark side, I think you'd realize that it's going to be tough, but I wish you good luck. But then again, in my experience, there is no such thing as luck, so we'll see. So with that, we'll start off with Assemblyman Matthews, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Tibbetts. Thank you, Dr. Goycochea, for the presentation. I guess sort of a broad question. My colleagues on the committee will know that I'm a very passionate proponent of open and transparent government. Of course, the force behind open government always has been the open meeting law in conjunction with the Nevada Public Records Act. Of course, in government, there are always competing objectives and competing considerations and things that are sort of in tension with each other. And government transparency is no exception. Light, darkness, the balance. My question would be, and my concern would be about precedent, perhaps. And you know, you make one exemption or you make an additional exemption, perhaps it opens the door to others. How did you approach this bill from that perspective? What do you think the standard ought to be in general in terms of deciding whether facets of government are going to be open versus conducted in secrecy? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. Jake Tibbetts again for the record. First off, I'm very glad that today's the day that I attended in person. And second, thanks for the question, Assemblyman. So, you know, in weighing those interests, I really wanted to lay it out to the committee that, you know, understanding there's very few exemptions under open meeting law. There's one to meet with legal counsel about pending litigation, you know, that you're in or pending litigation matters. You know, in this case, I think it's just really important. There is a knee-jerk about considering this exemption, but I really wanted to lay it out to the committee that the alternative is the status quo where we're at now. And if the legislature feels that that's the public policy that we want to live under, I think we just need to do that with eyes wide open. And that policy is that those that we are elected to represent us as a body cannot participate in these processes without running afoul of open meeting law. So that's the interest we're trying to weigh, where those that are elected to represent the people actually have a seat to have that first-hand conversation without being the telephone game and having it filtered through multiple people before it finally gets to them. So we believe that is in the public interest. In Eureka County, I can tell you we are proponents of open government and transparency. As I said, it's kind of odd to cast this bill as a government transparency bill, but it allows more eyeballs to be on the process that's going to be taking place and that is taking place on our federal estate, the federally administered land. So we believe that these limited exemptions should be when the interest for the general good of Nevada and the public interest is outweighed by any other type of non-open meeting.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, just a quick follow-up.
Please follow up.
Thanks. And I'm just wondering, were there alternatives, you know, to accomplish the same objectives without going the route of this exemption, or were those just sort of exhausted and really no conceivable way to accomplish what you wanted to absent this approach? Thanks.
So, Mr. Chairman, Jake Tibbetts again for the record, and I don't know if Chairman Gokichi, I may be stepping over him, but we, you know, I want to acknowledge we don't have the market cornered on ideas to address it. So this is a real issue that we're bringing forward. That's the way we cast it in front of the Public Lands Committee as well, is this is a real issue, and this is the way we feel we could address it. Like I said, other states, I can use Idaho as an example. I can actually quote you their public records law that allows them to have executive sessions to discuss documents that are withheld by any state or federal law. So, you know, we didn't go down the public records side. We felt that this was better here. I can tell you another option, and it's a very heavy lift, is to get things changed at the federal level. And so it's the Federal Freedom of Information Act Exemption 5 that really puts us in this position we are in. And, you know, that's something that from, you know, like I said, our little neck of the galaxy that we can't affect those changes, you know, and if that's the policy that the legislature would like to move forward with, you know, we can go down that route, but we're looking from the constraints we have right now, and it's state and local law that we're trying to find that ability. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
And thank you, Assembly Member. Next, we'll go to Assemblywoman Dickman, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Tibbetts and Dr. JJ. I have a bad feeling about this, but women always figure out the truth. So I just want to get this straight. The way things are right now, you cannot participate in these meetings because you would be violating the open meeting law. Is that correct? Because you're elected, Doctor?
Yes, Madam Assemblywoman, through the chair to you. So I can participate as a single county commissioner. or likewise, one of my other commissioners could participate. But any conversations that I have, I am not able to share with those other board members in a public meeting. And we are a 3-member board. Therefore, every time 2 of us are together discussing this, it would be a violation.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. And Mr. Goycochea, I'd like to remind you just to please state your name for the record. I didn't want to interrupt you in the middle of your statement, but no worries. Next, we'll go to Assemblywoman Brown-May.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Tibbetts. First, I want to say what a pleasure it is to see you in person, and I appreciate that you've traveled from a galaxy far, far away. It's really nice to have these open meetings in such a way that we get to interact, so I appreciate that. So I have a question relative to this, right? And many of our constituents will say, if only you knew the power of the dark side when we start to close doors and have meetings without including them, or you have failed me for the last time, as we talk about the importance of open communication. So really my question is relative to this. You stated 85% of our public lands. How many meetings do you anticipate we would utilize under an MOU like this? Do you see it? What's the frequency you anticipate?
So, Mr. Chairman, through you, Jake Tibbetts again for the record. So, Assemblywoman, thanks for the question. And you're digging deep on many of those references. That's very good. So, I'll note that so 85% of Nevada's lands are federally owned. The public, so that includes Department of Defense lands and things which aren't really cast as public lands. So public lands are a bit less than that. But regardless, the federal agencies all federal agencies have to follow the National Environmental Policy Act. So if it was as an example, was the Naval Air Station Fallon Range Training Complex, the expansion, that was all done through a NEPA process when they were proposing to do that, so there were various cooperating agencies. So it's not just the land management agencies, it applies all across the board. But many counties don't have a staff member that, like myself, they have county managers or people that can be involved. But I spend a very large amount of my time dealing with NEPA. And so, I don't want to have any guess what any other county or other public body, how many meetings they would have. But I can tell you that, just to be straight out honest, that I have 1 or 2 meetings every single week as a cooperating agency. But those aren't the types of meetings these are check-in meetings where it's checking in on the process. It's a conference call, and it's to see where things are moving along on the EIS. The substantive meetings are once or twice a month at most. So the types of meetings the county commission would need to be involved in and to have discussions with the board would be, or with like a federal agency would be, maybe as the beginning of the process is kicking off and then check-ins along the way, but they wouldn't be, they wouldn't be having these. At least in Eureka County, I can't see our public bodies having these meetings more than maybe once a month. And that's only when a NEPA process is moving forward. There are times when there's no NEPA processes happening whatsoever. So.
Thank you. Follow-up, Chair.
Please follow up.
Thank you. I sincerely appreciate that, and I think it's important that we get kind of on the record what is it that you're anticipating. There's one other piece that I just want to I think is important that we get on the record and not wanting to give in to hate. So is the MOU is officially approved through a public meeting that would then give you the authority to be able to have these types of conversations off a public record. Is that correct?
So, Mr. Chairman, through you, Jake Tibbetts again for the record. So yes, the memorandum of understanding or agreement is deliberated on and approved in a public meeting by the entire body. It's part of the record. It's available for anybody to see. So yes, and once that's entered into, and it's only under the bill, it's only if the federal agency requires the discussions to be held preliminary or deliberative or pre-decisional. And so it's only if they require that. And I want to point out there are regulations where they have to. It says they shall require that of state and counties. And then I do want to point out again that this doesn't allow any public body, county commissioners or otherwise, to engage in a non-public meeting just willy-nilly. It has to be for a specific project in which there's a memorandum signed. The memorandum of understanding or agreement outlines usually the schedule, what kind of documents will be shared. That's all outlined in the MOU.
Thank you, Mr. Tibbetts. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And next, we'll go to Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Tibbetts and Dr. Goicoechea. It's always great to see you. It's great to have you here in the Government Affairs Committee. And, you know, I think, Dr. Goicoechea, I speak for everyone when I say that we definitely do know who your father is. And so it's always a pleasure to have you speaking in this legislative body in your role as well. And obviously, you know, we're concerned with the possible unintended consequences, or maybe better said as like, we're just careful not to choke on our aspirations. And so we're just trying to, you know, and I understand that this bill seems to give counties and public bodies perhaps a new hope. But I'm just wondering if you could walk us through kind of like what happens right now. Like, is there, maybe I'm just not understanding right now, but is there anything right now that prevents these public bodies from just having an open meeting to have the deliberation? And why couldn't that be done just in an open meeting?
Sure. So, Madam Vice Chair, J.J. Goicoechea for the record, through Chair to you. As Mr. Tibbetts alluded to, in our written testimony that is on Nellis, you will see multiple examples of the language in an MOU and actual language from the regulations that in fact do prohibit us from discussing any of this material in an open meeting. As Mr. Tibbetts pointed out, we did, the county back in 2009, did receive a letter from the Bureau of Land Management after they had a public meeting discussing information that was in a draft EIS document. And that letter is attached there as well, in which it, you know, clearly says that the county did violate that MOU, violated federal law and federal regulation by discussing that. So we are unable to, if we wish to continue to participate as a cooperating agency and share that information and share our expertise, we must do so privately. We cannot do so in a public meeting under federal regulation.
Thank you for the response, and just a quick follow-up. So, okay, I think that helps me, and I don't think I had scrolled far enough in that document so I could find those that additional remarks regarding the confidentiality for what has already been done, and the statement from the United States Department of Interior, which I think is super helpful. But then right now, like is there a need for the entirety of the public body to be present? Because I know obviously a lot of that work is done with the with the officials and some of those individuals that are not public officials, right? Like a lot of the staffing, I imagine, is doing that. So can you just explain the need for that to be done by the public officials?
Sure. J.J. Goicoechea for the record, Madam Vice Chair, to you through the chair. Again, we are a 3-member board. So part of the concern, and I will speak for Eureka County at this time, you have one of your board members that is sitting at the table if you choose to make that. Some counties won't have any of their elected board members there. And then when this document does become final, it ends up being, I shouldn't say final, it becomes public. It goes from administrative draft out to public draft for consideration. Your phone starts ringing as an elected official. Your constituents want to know, I'm looking at this environmental assessment, I'm looking at this environmental impact statement. Why is the county not pushing back on this section? Why is the county supporting a new mining road over here or a new solar project over here that's going to have direct impacts on our wildlife? And if you're not aware of those conversations because you have not been able to participate in a meeting, you really aren't doing your job as an elected official. But again, we can't all collectively be at the table and know what that document says until it becomes public. And I do want to say that at no time is any money ever expended on anything like this, any public money, until it comes before a public meeting, if you will. And I think that is probably one other concern. So while we may not know what's going on, we're not going to be able to challenge any of this or do anything that way until it actually comes across that desk and it has been made a public document. This is strictly for early deliberation and to allow everyone to be on the same page. And quite frankly, with term limits, when a county commissioner leaves, I would hope that those others that are coming up would have a more active role in the process so that they can continue to carry on the work of that county.
Thank you. And like, is there, and as I read the piece of legislation right now, though, there's nothing limiting the public body from engaging in any additional discussion during that meeting that maybe are not pertaining to NEPA. Like, is there something specific in the bill? I'm trying to find that, just that makes it very clear that the public body can only engage in that conversation and that they could not be additional items on that agenda.
Mr. Chair, Jake Tibbetts, Dr. Gokichi, I'll take this one if okay. So Jake Tibbetts again for the record. So, the terms in the bill when it talks about engaging in pre-decisional and deliberative discussions, and that those terms are defined in various ways through the Federal Freedom of Information Act as well as case law related to Nevada public records laws. So those terms mean specific things, but no, so yes, having an open meeting and having general discussions about, say, a project or something that's under NEPA, a board can do that today, but they can't talk about any of the details because that would be then disclosing. So they can, in generalities, say, there's a project over here, XYZ, and we're going to, we're participating in it, but sorry, public, we can't tell, we don't even know because the 3 commissioners or 5 commissioners or whatever, we're not all briefed on it. I also want to talk that there are some concerns about what's often termed as a serial quorum, where, we can't do that either. It's not like, each individual county commissioner, there's at some point when they're breaking open meeting law if they're doing this kind of serial quorum type of thing. And so that's not allowed either. And so right now, I'll tell you one issue that really concerns me is if I have county commissioners that are on opposite ends of an issue, like they don't agree. And, how do I, as a unelected staff member, advocate for that public body's interest when they may be actually on divided? They're not of the same mind on something. So that is also something we are concerned about. So I don't know if I answered your question.
And I think maybe some clarification, though, I think in the legislation, just saying that this would be limited to the conversations related to the National Environmental Policy Act. Because as I read the bill right now, there would be nothing, though, preventing that closed meeting from then having additional agenda items that have nothing to do with NEPA. So I think that's more my concern. I definitely understand the intent of what we're trying to do, but I think just to something clarified that it can only be to have conversations regarding and deliberation regarding NEPA. And I understand like engaging in pre-decisional and deliberative discussion, but there's nothing that prevents it or sets those parameters, saying that meeting that's now closed can't just have like 20 other agenda items.
Okay. So, Mr. Chairman, yes, if I may just quickly respond. So, yes, if it needs to be clarified, of course, that's our intent. If it's not clear, I think for the record today, too, to make that clear. But I want to point out that it's, again, when you've entered into a memorandum of an understanding or agreement with a federal agency for the purpose of engaging on an action under National Environmental Policy Act, you may hold the closed meeting on the subject of the memorandum or agreement. So it is, again, the intent, if that's not clear, but it's to engage in just those discussions. But absolutely, if we need to make that clear, I'd be very happy to move forward with that.
Thank you, and thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Next, we'll go to Assemblyman Ellison.
Ellison? No, I'm your father. And laugh it up, fuzzball, because thank you, sir. You know, you couldn't have picked a better time in the world to be here, you guys, because I tell you, this is perfect for you. I just want you to know this is a great bill, and I was kind of wondering, has NACO come out and made a stand on this with you guys, or have they taken any stands on this at all? And then the other question I got is you know, we don't have this problem in other states. Is that correct?
So, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Jake Tibbetts for the record. So, Assemblyman, so if I'll start with your second question first. You know, I don't want to speak on behalf of other states. I do have colleagues in other states that do similar to what I do, and I would say they do have a similar issue. What I pointed out earlier is not every state, but there's a couple examples I could give you where states have some better clarity in their public records laws related to this issue. So, but I think other states do face a similar issue. And then your first question about NACO's involvement, I believe that they may testify today, so I don't want to step on their toes, but NACO did support this bill when it was on the other side. So we have somewhat of an alliance with NACO.
So you're saying, if you only knew the power on the dark side, so they're going to talk about that. So I can't believe we're having so much fun on this. You've failed me for the last time on these kind of things, so I'm going to make sure I get out and support this bill a lot. The question is, this passed 100% on the Senate side, and I did get a text from the Senate side and ask about how it's going, because it's such an important bill. And I put in a couple bills in the past that pertain to the open meeting law, and I can understand where we're having problems here. And so I think this is a time we can maybe adjust this. And like I said, we're doomed if we don't. And I want JJ to know, help me, one Kenobi, you're the only hope. And I'd rather kiss a woogie than see this bill die. So we're having fun with this, but it's a great bill. I'm so happy you guys brought this forward, because we have issues in this, and I don't want to see this go to the dark side. So thank you very much. And, yes.
I think seldom have we ever seen someone so subtle with their references. It flowed so well. These minutes are going to make absolute sense. They will, I promise. I promise. Next, we'll go to Assemblywoman Anderson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you for bringing forward the language. I really do appreciate it. I'm trying to keep a little bit optimistic, but I also have to be realistic. I have a little bit of a bad feeling about it as well. One reason why is possibly because of the letter that was sent in to the Senate committee from February 10th. And it's similar to Vice Chair Torres's concerns. At one point, the letter references the bill is expansive enough that any mention of a project, be it a mine or highway improvement or toxic waste cleanup, would be exempted. You've made it very clear that that is not the intent. But I just, either for Dr. Gocochea or for Mr. Tibbetts, walk me through, if you're in this small conversation and there's the two commissioners, there's another member from the agency that's there, two agencies that are there, there's somebody that's with the MOU and MOA that has been entered, and you're talking about, I don't know, let's just say a mine. And then all of a sudden, somebody from the federal government says, well, let's also talk about this, because we're all going to be involved in this as well. And yet there's no MOU or MOA entered. Who is responsible to say, this is not appropriate, and we're going to find ourselves in a dark place if we continue to do this?
Okay, Mr. Chairman, so I'll take a... Jake Tibbetts for the record. So I want to note that testimony, Assemblywoman, that you mentioned was on the first draft. I think you will hear opposition testimony today, so I don't want to cast that, everybody came to support, but the bill was substantially amended. It did clarify that it's an action under the National Environmental Policy Act rather than a decision. And so, you know, you have to have somewhat of an understanding of the National Environmental Policy Act and how that takes place. The National Environmental Policy Act is something that federal agencies use to weigh the environmental effects of any federal action. So it can be a private party proposing to do something on the federal estate, and then the federal agencies have to analyze it. They disclose the impacts, and then they select from an alternative or a range of alternatives on what they want to move forward with. So it's very structured. It's not, you know, it's a very structured thing. It's not usually, it's formal. It is very formal. There's a process on how it's done. It's you know, it's a well-oiled machine. But on your question about who you know, if you're sitting in a room with other agencies and say the Bureau of Land Management says, hey, while we're all here, you know, I think it's very similar to how do we know when a public body is having a discussions with their legal counsel outside of a public meeting. So it's one of those things, you know, it's on a case-by-case basis, but it's up to those folks to ensure they're, you know, they've signed an oath and whatever to follow the laws as well. And so if they're, you know, it's up to them to uphold themselves to that oath that they signed, I guess is all I can say.
Are we good, Assemblywoman?
Well, yes, I thank you, because I do think once you start down that dark path, it will just continue to dominate both your destiny, but then also, unfortunately, sometimes the conversations. So I really do appreciate the answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. Next, we'll go to Assemblywoman Thomas, please.
Good morning, Chair, and thank you for the presentation, Mr. Tibbetts and Dr. JJ. My question, well, it's actually not a question, it's a comment. And I would like to comment on behalf of the community of Eureka. Because we're taking away transparency, we're taking away their right to a public forum. And my fear is that this leads to the path of darkness, of the dark side. And we know that fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, and hate leads to suffering. And I really do believe that the public will look at this and feel that they are being sidetracked, that the government is not being forthright. So my issue or my comment is for the community that you serve, that everything that we do as far as government should be public. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, may I respond? So Jake Tibbetts for the record. And totally understand that context. And, you know, I would note that, again, as I tried to outline, without this bill, these NEPA processes are happening. There's people at the table, and we're actually cutting out our citizens in Nevada by limiting the ability for their elected officials to participate right now. So I think our local community members and citizens are not advocated for. Their interests are not being put forward in a necessary way because of the current restrictions we have. So I do believe this allows for more engagement of our communities through those that our people have elected to represent them. And that's what we're trying to get at. Understand the perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, I appreciate that, but I still see that transparency is not there. And when we close doors and we make decisions for the public, you can imagine if this body did the same thing. Thank you.
And lastly, we have Assemblywoman Black, please.
Thank you. I have a little bit of experience with this from the city council, so Wouldn't it be easier to, rather than exempt another meeting, to just, I know it's more work, but to brief each commissioner or council person or whatever they are individually with the agency and let them give their feedback at that point? Because there were times in city council where we would have 2x2s, right? It would depend how many were on your board, basically. But rather than exempting another meeting from open meeting law, why not just brief each of the commissioners independently?
So, Mr. Chairman, Jake Tibbetts for the record, thanks for the question. So that is the way it happens right now. And, you know, that I would say the result's the same, is you have your but it does create a lot of work. It causes issues for entities that don't have the capacity or the staff. I can tell you many rural counties do not have the ability to, they don't have staff members to stay dedicated to this stuff. And they don't have a county commissioner that can go to each meeting every time. And I'll tell you, while I work for Eureka County, I do believe that I work for a lot of rural Nevada. I draw my paycheck from Eureka County, but I do try to advocate for the needs of rural Nevada as well. But I've been to many cooperating agency meetings where other counties have signed the MOU, but they don't have somebody to be there. They don't have a staff person to send. They don't have somebody dedicated to that. So that is the way. If this bill, I just want to again outline, if this bill does not move forward, that is the way that we do it. But again, it's each county commissioner. They can't talk amongst themselves. What if there's differing perspectives? Then am I a mediator between the county commissioners to try to have discussions with both? If we're doing all these circular things to try to get to without putting this exemption forward, are those discussions proper? I think we're just going down a road that there's I think it's best to hear it directly from the federal agencies. And so those elected people are getting it face to face and firsthand rather than being passed through multiple avenues. But if the bill doesn't pass, that is the way it works right now. And we can continue to do that. But I think we need to understand that it does cut out some rural communities that don't have that capacity, and it does not ensure that each voice of a public body is heard by the federal agencies.
Follow?
I understand that it is more work, been there, done that, but in the name of transparency, maybe that's what it requires.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. And lastly, and we'll close it out with Assemblyman Ellison, please.
Thank you. Mr. Tibbetts, you mentioned that just now. What's kind of strange about some small boards and sitting on the city council and county commissioners and here? If you look at some of these boards, they're small, and each individual brings something different to the board. It's not like we're all in agriculture, we're all in, everybody brings something different to the board. And I think that's what is the biggest thing about this bill is they're there, they can ask them questions, and it's under the open meeting law. If they went back and there's a 3-man board or 5-man board, you can only talk to a couple of them unless you agendize it and put it on the agenda and talk that way. So I think it's a good deal to have it the way it is. I think this bill addresses that problem, and I think that maybe NACO can hit this better than I can, but most of these boards are so different, and just like this board, everybody here is different almost. You take a look at it. They bring something of expertise where 3-man boards, they might have difference of opinion on all of them. So it's good to have that out there and be able to speak and ask them questions individually. And I think that's a great thing, and that's why I support this bill. Thank you. And maybe you want to discuss it or ask questions or whatever. But
Thank you, Assemblyman Ellison, for that, your insight on boards. So with that, I'd like to go to those wishing to testify in support of Senate Bill 77. I wanted to say once again, thank you to both for your presentation and indulging us in that light humor for today. So thank you for that. With that, broadcast, if we could go to those wishing to testify in support of Senate Bill 77.
To testify in support of Senate Bill 77, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits of 323, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You may begin.
This is Steve Walker, Stebewalker. Good morning, Chairman Flores and committee members. I'm representing Douglas County, and Douglas County supports SB 77 for all the reasons presented by Commissioner Goicoechea and Mr. Tibbetts. Thank you.
And thank you, Mr. Walker, for specifically calling in today. With that, we'll go to the next caller wishing to testify on Senate Bill 77.
Caller with the last 3 digits of 929, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Colby Prout, Colbyprout, and I'm the Natural Resources Manager for the Nevada Association of Counties. NACO would like to express its support for SB 77. This law will encourage and enable full and transparent cooperation between counties and federal land management agencies, and give county governments and their residents full and fair representation regarding major plans and projects affecting their counties. While it may seem as though this bill encourages secrecy or lack of transparency, in fact, it does the opposite. That's because currently federal agencies engaged in the planning process under the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, do not engage in deliberation with County Board of Commissioners. Instead, they are forced to engage with unelected, appointed county staff, out of view of the public and without accountability to voters. With the passage of SB 77, federal agencies will be able to deliberate with a fully impaneled Board of County Commissioners with their varied perspectives, questions, and each representing each county's region. The underlying importance of the exception in SB 77 is to ensure county governments and their constituents are properly represented and protected when an agency is engaged in a large-scale project within a county by allowing agencies to deliberate with the full elected County Board of Commissioners. Just as the open meeting law was amended in recognition of the attorney-client privilege to permit a closed session during county commission meetings, this law would amend the open meeting law in recognition of the federal agency's pre-decisional and deliberative communications privilege to allow a closed session during county commission meetings. Without SB 77, federal agencies will continue to avoid and deliberate in private with unelected staff or single county commissioners without the questions, deliberations, or perspective of a fully impaneled county commission, because Nevada's open meeting law requires that such discussions be open to the public, which is in contravention of that federal privilege. SB 77 will simply reconcile a tension between federal and state sunshine laws. For the reasons just described, NACO urges this committee's support of SB 77.
And thank you for joining us this morning. Broadcast next caller in support of Senate Bill 77.
Caller with the last 3 digits of 728. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You may begin.
Good morning, Chair Flores and members of the committee. For the record, this is Marla McDade Williams, MARLAMC, capital DADE, WILLIAMS, with Strategies 360 representing Churchill County today. The bill presenter explained the issue well. Churchill County has 3 commissioners and only 1 member could attend at a time under a memorandum of understanding because of Nevada's requirements for when a quorum is present. If 2 or more attended, it could be a violation of the open meeting law. The member who attends carries issues forward to the best of ability of the member, but the integrity of the process can lose some value if that member isn't able to carry forward the concerns of other members of the commission, which they shouldn't if they're complying with Nevada law and not having serial meetings. Having the ability to have a discussion with the full members of can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I'm sorry, I had some feedback there. Having the ability to have a discussion with the full members of the commission and get direction would be beneficial to the process. As noted in previous testimony, the MOU is entered into a public meeting, and after the commission until public remaining discussions are done in a public meeting. Also, I concur with Mr. Tibbetts about the information that comes forward in a public meeting after an MOU has been entered into. It's very general, and due to the limitations of the MOU, commissioners can't share the deliberations. They can only generally announce that the meetings are occurring and discuss only the publicly available information available at that time. I also want to extend our appreciation to the opponents of this bill in the Senate. Mr. Tibbetts and the bill sponsors worked with them to amend the bill and get it to this point. We recognize the objections to the federal process, and as we've worked through this, we've appreciated the understanding of those barriers for Nevada's local elected officials, and more importantly, the constituents in Nevada who are not represented under the current system. We urge your support for SB 77.
And thank you for joining us. Next caller in support of Senate Bill 77.
For the new callers, to testify in support of Senate Bill 77, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no more callers in the neutral position at this time.
Thank you. At this time, we'll go to those wishing to testify in opposition to Senate Bill 77. Broadcast, please.
To testify in opposition to Senate Bill 77, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits of 807, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You may begin.
I'm Richard Carpel, Executive Director of the Nevada Press Association. I'm testifying on behalf of
Sir, I apologize
the Press Association.
I apologize that I'm interrupting you. If I could just have you spell your name for the record, please.
Oh, sure, I apologize. I'm sorry about that. Richard Carpel, it's Karpel.
Please proceed.
All right. All right, thank you. Thank you, Chairman Flores and Vice Chair Torres and members of the committee. So I'm testifying on behalf of both the Press Association and the Nevada Open Government Coalition, whose members include the ACLU of Nevada, the Nevada Policy Research Institute, and NAACP of Las Vegas. I should also say that I'm pretty sure that I'm testifying on behalf of the Light, but have confessed that I have not seen the last few movies in the Star Wars movies, and so I'm not completely certain about that. But so let me begin by saying we appreciate the efforts of Mr. Tibbetts and NACO to listen to our concerns and engage with us in good faith, but we do oppose Senate Bill 77. We recognize that the NEPA proceedings are vitally important and have the potential to have a significant impact in the counties where they are held, but they are entirely secret. They're not secret to the government employees, the federal and state government employees who participate in the proceedings, but secret to the citizens of the community in which they're held. Citizens of those counties are left completely in the dark until it is too late and until the die has been cast on the underlying project. And SB 77 asked us and you to join that conspiracy of secrecy to sign our agreement on the dotted line. We think it's a bad idea for the Nevada Legislature to pass a law sanctioning the federal government's demand for enhanced secrecy. Now, we know that other states like Idaho, New Mexico, Washington, and Wyoming have not passed laws exempting their counties from the requirements of their own open meeting laws. And at the very least, we think this committee should ask why it is that Nevada appears to be the only state where passing a law like this is necessary. I should also add that I appreciate Mr. Tibbetts' research of the statutes. But I talked to colleagues in those states who dispute his analysis. I'm not sure who is correct, but I think it would be prudent for the committee to find out. Thank you, and appreciate your time today.
And thank you for joining us this morning. We'll continue with opposition on Senate Bill 77. Next caller, please.
Caller with the last three digits of 792. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You may begin.
This is Patrick Donnelly, Patrick Donnelly. I'm Nevada State Director at the Center for Biological Diversity. I was speaking to you today in opposition to SB 77. We have made our opposition known in the past, and on Nellis you'll find a letter signed by environmental, social justice, open government, and journalism organizations opposing this bill. And while there has been an amendment made which removed parts of the bill pertaining to the Public Records Act, the heart of this bill is a carve-out from the Nevada open meeting law, a carve-out which discourages transparency and could encourage cronyism, leaving the door open to conflicts of interest. States and counties are not merely passive observers in these processes. They frequently have a vested interest in the outcome of a NEPA proceeding. Counties have strong economic incentives to get projects permitted, and we talk about this like it's just rural counties, but there are major projects in the urban counties of Nevada that have a NEPA nexus, highway expansions, flood control projects, it goes on and on. So this affects all Nevadans, not just people in Eureka County. Ultimately, we hear a story from these bill proponents pleading about how onerous it is to comply with transparency laws. Well, yes, governments often find transparency inconvenient. Bill proponents are saying there's a deficiency in federal law, so we need to roll back state law to also have the same deficiency. That doesn't make any sense. Furthermore, this bill isn't happening in a vacuum. Some of the bill supporters have a long record of fighting against NEPA. In fact, one of the bill proponents was at a signing ceremony at Donald Trump's White House on a number of executive orders stripping away NEPA protections. There's an anti-NEPA agenda in some corners of Nevada, and this bill comes from the same place. The open meetings law and NEPA are designed to promote transparency and democracy so that government is held accountable for their actions. And this does not change when a public body is working with the federal government. The public has a right to know what state and local agencies and other public bodies are doing. And the proposed legislation would be an affront to the principles of transparency and open government, which are the foundation of both NEPA and the Nevada Open Meetings Law. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. Next caller in opposition to Senate Bill 77.
The bill supporters have a
Chair, there are no more callers in opposition at this time.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to those wishing to testify in the neutral position on Senate Bill 77.
To testify in the neutral position on Senate Bill 77, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in the neutral position at this time.
Thank you. And to our presenters, again, thank you. Any closing remarks you may have? We did. And
Mr.
just
Chairman.
broadcast, just to confirm, did we say there is no neutral? I may have misunderstood.
Chair, I can check again.
Thank you.
There are no more callers in the neutral position at this
Perfect.
time.
Just wanted to confirm. To either one of our co-presenters, any closing remarks you may have?
Mr. Chairman, Chairman Goycochea from Eureka County, for the record. I want to again thank you guys for hearing this bill this morning, and again reiterate that we do understand the knee-jerk response, and we are all about transparency. Just to remind everyone, if this bill does not move forward, we will continue to engage the way we have for the last decades, behind closed doors, one member or a staff member meeting with our federal delegation, with our federal agencies, and conducting the business that we have in that manner. To the vice chair, we stand ready to work with you on an amendment, and I do agree that somehow some language that tightened this down to only be discussed according to what was in that MOU, would be better. I do have an idea for one simple insertion of a word that I think may get to that end. We look forward to working with you on that. And again, thanks everyone for the questions today and for allowing us to testify.
And thank you again. Thank you both. Appreciate the presentation and walking through that. And again, thank you for indulging the committee with the lighthearted playfulness this morning. With that, we'll go ahead and close out the hearing on Senate Bill 77. And I'm sure members will continue to reach out should they have any additional questions. And next on the agenda, and patiently waiting, Senator Brooks, please, we'll open up the hearing on Senate Bill 283. Good morning, whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon, Chair Flores and members of the Committee on Government Affairs. My name is Senator Chris Brooks from Senate District 3 in Clark County, and today I'm here to present Senate Bill 283. The intent of Senate Bill 283 is to revitalize our economy, create jobs, and help us meet our urgent energy and water conservation needs. In 2017, the legislature approved Assembly Bill 5, an act that provided for the creation of local improvement districts for energy efficiency or renewable energy improvements. And I worked on it with members of this committee when I sat on Assembly Government Affairs under Chair Flores. And this was Nevada's version of commercial PACE, or property assessed clean energy legislation. At present, in the 4 years since passage, only 2 projects have been financed using AB 5's provisions. By contrast, across the country, over $1.4 billion worth of commercial PACE projects were funded since Assembly Bill 5 was passed. Nebraska financed over $31 million worth, and Utah financed over $64 million worth of projects in that same time period. We have willing property owners throughout the state. As a result of our current CPACE statutes, what we don't have are willing capital providers, financiers willing to do business in Nevada. We need to change that, and SB 283 will make that change. Like the wise words once uttered a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, you can't stop the change any more than you can stop the suns from setting. Senate Bill 283 is a bill that is consistent with the best practices and best legislation that is used to activate commercial PACE in 26 states across the country. Senate Bill 283 removes the unintentional impediments to finance. Senate Bill 283 simplifies the structure of commercial PACE to allow direct financing between capital providers and property owners, secured by the imposition by local government of an assessment and lien on the property assigned by the capital provider. Senate Bill 283 expands the range of eligibility consistent with nationwide trends, including water conservation measures and resiliency improvements like seismic reinforcements and fire hardening. And Senate Bill 283 gets rid of the complicated maximum benefit formula we originally opposed to limit how much could be financed. Committee members, this is not residential PACE. This is commercial PACE where millions of dollars are at stake, lawyers are involved, and it's arm's length deal, and most importantly, where any bank that has a stake in the property has to consent to the deal for it to happen. I repeat, this legislation maintains the requirement to lender consent, the most important safeguard to ensure that the use of PACE makes financial and business sense to a property owner. Expanding the PACE program is part of Governor Sisolak's climate initiative plan. The end result, committee members, is legislation that tries to put us on the right track to attract the millions of dollars of investment that are waiting to come to Nevada. And all the while, doing so in a manner that conserves our resources. But, as a famous philosopher from Dagobah once said, do or do not, there is no try. That is why I introduced this bill. If it pleases the committee, I would like to hand it off to Mr. Michael Yackey, the Senior Vice President and Senior Counsel, to explain the importance of this bill. And in front of you, you have an amendment, a proposed amendment that actually incorporates some of the comments we've gotten since this has passed out of the Senate and come over to the Assembly. And I believe that is on Nellis, and I believe all the committee members have that. But Mr. Yaki, if it's okay with the chair, if he could walk through the bill and the concept, and he even has some slides.
I see the force is strong within you, Senator. Thank you. Mr. Yaki, good morning. Welcome whenever you're ready.
Thank you. For the record, Michael Yaki, Senior Vice President for Policy and Programs and Senior Counsel for Petros Pace Finance. With the committee's indulgence, I'd like to share a PowerPoint. Thank you very much, members of the committee. For the record, Michael Yaki. I'm going to just do a very brief presentation. You'll have this in your packets, and we don't need to go too much into it. This is, again, about SB 283. I want to thank Senator Brooks for his leadership and his stewardship of this legislation. It's been a fun ride through the Kessel Run, getting to this place right now. So I am representing Petros Pace Finance. We're one of the nation's largest capital providers of CPACE financing. I am also joined by 4 other capital providers, Dividend, Twain, Pace Equity, and Greenworks, all of whom want to be lenders in the Nevada market. We represent a large share of the CPACE financing community. And since 2017, when this statute was enacted, over 1,500 projects in 26 states, totaling $1.7 billion have been financed. And we really think that Nevada could be, within 2 years, a $100 million investment market and can make Nevada part of the top tier of CPACE states. And just as a preface, I do want to apologize for the fact that I'm appearing remotely. My hyperdrive is in the shop. The droids just can't get it to work. And I'm forced to appear on this rather rudimentary holograph. So, quick primer on CPACE. You saw that Senator Brooks talked about as a form of financing. That is, eligible improvements are repaid and secured by an assessment that's subsequently placed on the property. It's in 26 states. There are 2,500 projects since 2010, 2.4 billion in financing, and incredibly, over 25,000 direct jobs created by it. And again, in 2017, you passed AB5, a PACE program for commercial properties. It's found in the NRS 271, but only 2 projects have been financed during that entire period of time. And what Senator Brooks was saying is that places like Nevada and Utah, like Nebraska and Utah, are now well over 50 and 100 million just in those states alone since that time period. So why are there so few projects, despite the attractive markets in Las Vegas, Clark County, Reno, Tahoe, and elsewhere in the state of Nevada? Well, as was stated, in PACE, there is do or do not. There is no try. And unfortunately, AB5, the legislature did try to do PACE, but didn't quite put off. And it's not that easy. It's like trying to, bullseye a womp rat on Tatooine in a T-16. It's just not that easy to do. But we're going to try and we're doing it in this legislative amendment that we have before you. We're conforming your CPACE statute to national standards and best practices required by rating agencies and securitization standards. And why is that important? Because it creates low interest rates and long terms. That's sort of the magic bullet for how CPACE works for property owners, because it enables them to get low cost money, manage cash flow. And we do this by reforming the statute to conform to these national standards and the points I did before. And it's important to remember this. This is a voluntary program for property owners. You're not conscripted into the Imperial Stormtroopers. You can only do this if you consent. And it's the same with local governments. It's not like the Empire is going to dictate it to you. If you're Alderaan or Mandalore or Coruscant, you can choose to offer CPACE or not. The other thing is, we want to conform the CPACE statute to national standards and best practices for eligible and qualified improvements. Right now, you only allow energy efficiency and renewable energy, which is great. I mean, if you want to create a better HVAC system on your Death Star, that might be eligible. But you want to do water efficiency, you want to put a new vaporator, deal with the desert climate in Tatooine, that would be eligible under this new statute, as well as resiliency, seismic, fire, indoor air quality. Someone asked me on my way in, would this include blast shields against Imperial Death Stars? And I said, probably not. It has to be fixed to the land. And again, the key to all this is lender consent. Lender consent means that that the lenders on the property, pre-existing lenders on the property, have an absolute veto on this. But it also makes for rigorous underwriting, because not only did they do the underwriting first on the property when they first put a lien on, then we as capital providers underwrite it, and then they underwrite it a third time based on what we're doing. So there's a lot of checks and balances involved here. Finally, we want to make it easier for the CPACE statute to conform to national standards and best practices, to make it easier for municipalities to offer CPACE. Less guesswork, easier guidelines, better rules to follow, and liability protection. Basically, giving local governments a little Beskar steel for their Mandalorian armor in case something goes wrong. The risk is on the capital providers, not on municipal governments. And again, you'll see in the amendments how we have done that and worked with counties like Clark County, the Nevada Association of Counties, Las Vegas, Reno, and others to make that happen. The amendment that you have before you contains the concerns we've already addressed from the Nevada Bankers Associations, the Credit Union League, and the cities of Las Vegas and Reno. The proposed amendment that you have before us includes more work with Clark County and NACO and Nevada Energy. We worked with them together to ensure that we did things to provide better clarity and protection for local governments, first and foremost, more flexibility and more control. I know it's a lot of green and red and blue and purple, and quite frankly, it was very confusing to me. But I just remember this as I was negotiating with all of them, with this simple mantra that I learned as a young man on Dagobah. PACE is the path to the light side of the force. PACE leads to investment. Investment leads to jobs. Job leads to prosperity. And I sense much PACE in all of you on the committee. So SB 23 will conform the Nevada CPACE statute to national standards and best practices for financing, for improvements, and for municipalities. It will create jobs, environmental benefits, disaster resilience. And so thank you, members of the committee. You are my only hope.
You are definitely by far the most powerful Jedi. You did that so seamlessly. I mean, we are impressed. I wish you were in the room with us. But thank you for that. And Senator Brooks, please.
Thank you. And that is our presentation, and I would be open to questions from the committee, and Mr. Yaki is available as well.
Great. Thank you both again. Assemblyman Matthews, did I see that you had a question? Or I may have misread. I think you turned around, but I want to make sure.
Yes, I do, actually. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Senator, for the presentation. Really appreciate it. So walk me, if you would, through a practical example. I just anticipating, talking to a constituent. I need someone to show me my place in all this. Someone comes into my district, wants to build a hotel, wants to go through PACE to do it. How would that work in a kind of as simplified a manner as you could? Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblyman Matthews. And I'm glad you asked that question, because that really kind of helps the light bulb go off when you can walk through kind of a process. And Mr. Yaki, will you give us an example of a project that you had worked on, and that might be an example that Mr. or Assemblyman Matthews could be relevant to his district?
Thank you. For the record, Michael Yaki, through the chair, to the Assemblyman. Yes, let me shed a little light side on your example. If, for example, as a constituent wanted to build a hotel in your area, what they would be able to do is they would probably put together a financing package. That financing package will probably consist of a major senior construction lender, a big bank, the Bank of Nevada, whatever. But also they'll be looking at other forms of financing too, because every lender has a limit as to how much they're willing to go on the property. And PACE becomes part of that, because PACE can not only fill that gap, but to fill the gap for the specific improvements in that property. If they're going to put in energy efficient HVAC, if they're going to put in heat resistant windows, if they're going to put solar on the roof, if they want to put in energy efficient fixtures in the hotel, all those are eligible for CPACE financing. So what would have to happen is the local government in your area would have to under the statute enact a CPACE district for the purposes of your property owner being able to qualify and apply. And they would set up the program, and they would need to go through a process set up by the local government, but it would require what we think this is a much more streamlined and simplified way to do it. If they have, they're going to need professional engineers, an energy auditor, people who do water studies or renewable energy feasibility studies will all be part of that. But together they can put together a package and then submit it to the local government, and they will say, yes, this all fits within the statute. It's fine. And they will receive financing from a company such as ourselves. In return, what we'll do is we'll receive the assessment and lien that the local government imposes on the property through a written agreement with the property owner. That is then assigned to us, and we will bill, collect, and enforce it ourselves. So the local government has only a very light touch on this entire thing. That's essentially the ecosystem by which CPACE would work. And we do this on a national scale. We work with national hotel operators, national hotel developers across the country. And I can tell you with great certainty, we wouldn't be here today if there weren't a large number of these individuals who have already contacted us and other companies wanting to come in. But unfortunately, because the PACE statute here is not quite, I won't say as good, but it's just not the same, up to the same standard as other national programs. We all hesitate to come in, and that's why only 2 have been financed over the past 4 years.
Thank you. A follow-up, Mr. Chairman?
Please follow up.
And talk through, if you would, for me, just from the perspective of local governments. What happens if a project fails? How are they protected? How do they make sure that the resources that may be lost are recuperated, and from a taxpayer perspective as well? Thanks.
Sure. Through the chair to the Assemblyman Michael Yaki. One of the key things in CPACE is what I just said, is that the risk is on the capital provider, not the local government. The local government's function is essentially confined to approving the application, executing the voluntary written assessment agreement between the property owner and the county, assigning that to us. And once that occurs, their responsibility is gone. So anything that goes wrong with the property, first and foremost, is ours. If, for example, it goes into default and foreclosure, the bill, as it's been amended and written to you, and this was worked out with Clark and other local governments, makes it very clear that the assessment lien that we have is junior to the lien for general taxes imposed by local governments, which means that they get first dibs on any monies obtained from any foreclosure sale before we get a penny. The likelihood then is that they will be made whole, and we probably will be made whole too as well. But this is meant to provide financial insulation for them in that situation. In addition, there's very strong prescriptive language that says that local governments are not responsible for the actions of any employees, nor are they financially responsible for these assessments that they've imposed on the property. No public funds, no full faith and credit are at risk. So their credit rating isn't at risk. And one last thing is that any money that they put, any time and effort that they spend in administering the program, they may recoup through the imposition of a reasonable fee imposed on the property owner and the capital provider for processing the application. So fiscally, they are made whole, they are held harmless, and in the end, they have priority over us in case there's any default or foreclosure.
Thank you. One final question, Mr. Chair, if I may. My understanding in reading this bill would be that jurisdictions would be eligible regardless of population. Is that the case? Are there population requirements, or is it the case that size matters not? Thank you.
Through the chair, Michael Yaki, to the assemblyman. PACE will occur where PACE occurs, where a property owner wants to go, whether it's a small community or large community. You'll find, we found in a lot of states like Nevada, Nebraska, which is very low density, that you'll find a lot of people wanting to use this along the interstate with hotels, strip malls, what have you, that are along the way. So population density doesn't matter. We found that PACE can flourish wherever property owners who are willing and able to do this are there. So no, the population size and density does not matter at all.
Thank you, Chair.
And Mr. Chair, if I may, through you to Assemblyman Matthews, this actually, the language here conforming it with national standards as well as setting forth a lot of the guidelines makes it far more likely that smaller counties that might have less resources from a staff standpoint will be able to adopt it because it kind of lays out the playbook for them.
I appreciate that, Senator. Thanks so much.
Next, we'll go to Assemblywoman Considine, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Senator Brooks and Mr. Yaki for bringing this forward. I just want to make sure that I have this straight in my head and then ask a simple question afterwards. If I have this process correct, this is private investment money that is used for portions of a project, so like a certain layer of a project, and in exchange for the low, I'm assuming very low interest rates, that loan is paid back over a long period of time. The loan survives whether or not the property is transferred or sold to someone else, because that loan, and the wording may be wrong, is not only secured to the property, but also through the county, because the county in a way is like the servicer of the loan because they pay those assessments so that's I guess where some of my confusion is I thought this was a portion where the county is involved, because I also see, where was it? If the property goes into default, the investment it's a junior priority to taxes, or anything that the county would require, but is it in a superior priority list than other loans because of this, I guess, connection to the county? If somebody could just clear that up, thank you.
And through you, Chair Flores, to Assemblywoman Considine, if Mr. Yaki could answer that. I was tracking with you right to the very end, and then that's where you deviated.
Thank you very much. For the record, Michael Yaki, through the chair, to the Assemblywoman. This specifies that the assessment lien, the CPACE assessment lien, is junior to any liens for general taxes by a local government. That means that in any collection, any payment, any sale, any proceeds must go to the satisfaction of the local government first before it goes to us. The other liens and encumbrances that I references basically are referencing mortgage liens, deed of trust liens on the property, which is why, and the only way that we have superior position in that case is by operation of law and following the statute. And that means we need to have the consent of any person who has a secured interest or a lien, a mortgage or a deed of trust on that property in order for the application to be approved. But the county does not collect, the county does not do anything other than execute the agreement, place it to place the lien on the property, assigns it to a capital provider like us. So they are out, except in the unlikely situation. And I mean unlikely. There have been 2,500 commercial PACE assessments across this country, and not a single one has gone to foreclosure. And as I explained to you earlier, the reason why is that these properties are very tightly underwritten, more 3 times in order for us to get consent. So local government, there is no county role other than the initial role of putting the assessment on the property, and then thereafter, if anything goes wrong, if they have liens on the property because they didn't pay property taxes either, they get their money first, and then us, and then a person who holds a mortgage or a deed of trust on the property.
Thank you. Okay, So that is, this lien is superior, and I apologize. I think I was misinformed, that I thought that the assessment or the loan was paid back from the county to the investors, but it's not. You're saying it's paid back by the developers or whoever owns the property. Thank you for clearing that up. I
Yes.
appreciate it. Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome.
And lastly, we have Assemblywoman Dickman, please.
Thank you, Chair. I was just wondering if you could give us, I mean, what would be the minimum size project you could do this with?
Through you, Chair, to Assemblywoman Dickman, I don't believe there is a statutory minimum, but there's a functional minimum, and I think Mr. Yaki could speak to that.
Yes, thank you very much. For the record, Michael Yaki, through the chair, to the Assemblywoman. It depends on the type of PACE capital providers that are out there. We've worked with projects as an industry as low as $100,000, as high as $54 million and above. It all depends on two things. One is, can the property sustain a PACE assessment? And in that analysis is any person who holds a mortgage on that property, will they consent to it because if they believe that the benefits and the cash flow coming from the benefits of the PACE will outweigh any risk to them on the property. So what we've done a lot of times, what we've seen is that smaller banks, credit unions, and what have you, have actually gotten into I would call the smaller, lower level PACE lending, about $500,000 and below, because frequently what they're doing is they're going to use their own customer base and work with them to do it. But it's up to the lender, and on the low side and on the high side, the sky is the limit. We've already had interest from some properties in Nevada to the tune of $85 to $100 million in CPACE, which means that they're talking about a very significant reconstruction or new construction of a property. That's why we're excited to be here. That's why, again, this is something where we really appreciate your time and effort, and the time and effort of everyone, of the stakeholders who have worked with us to get us to where we are today under Senator Brooks' leadership.
Thank you. That helped the understanding a little bit too. So thanks, Chair, and thanks, Senator.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. And my apologies, I preemptively said last. Now we're in the final question here. Assemblywoman Black, please.
Why do I have a feeling you're going to be the death of me? I just had to get one. So I have a good friend who actually has experience with this PACE program being implemented in Las Vegas. And he was telling me that in order to get it to work, they had to expand the program out of the casino corridor into the individual property part of Las Vegas. And for some reason, it was opposed by the individual businesses, even though the program doesn't require participation. Can you offer any insight into why the private business owners didn't want to take advantage of the program or were apprehensive about it?
Through you, Chair, to Assemblywoman Black, the way the PACE statutes were, it had a tremendous amount of hurdles and impediments based on how it was passed in 2017. In 2017, there were only a handful of examples of PACE, and they were mostly residential. So there were a tremendous amount of protections in place and hurdles that a property owner would have to clear to even be able to take advantage of it. That really kind of scared financing and capital out of the market and made it kind of not worthwhile. But as the industry has advanced and there's far more projects and examples out there, there's still some issues surrounding residential PACE for sure, but as it kind of moved into the commercial space, it has evolved into what we're trying to do with this right here. And it just, it was really difficult to make a program that was worthwhile under the current existing statutes. And so, but I think Mr. Yaki could speak to that because he's in the business every day. But that was my understanding in dealing with the cities, the counties, and then some business owners who tried to take advantage of this over the last couple of years, and why I thought it was important to work with them to bring the bill. But Mr. Yaki, if you have some examples of that.
Thank you. For the record, Michael Yaki through the chair to the Assemblywoman. To paraphrase someone, I found their lack of faith very disturbing. But the fact is that it is a voluntary program. There were a lot of impediments in the original bill that put a lot of friction and requirements on property owners that properly belonged in residential, but not in someone who understands how to work with contractors and how to negotiate with their bank. So I can't quite say it other than people have a hard time understanding pace. It is a very complicated thing. It's like looking at the plan of a Death Star and trying to find that one ventilation shaft that you can find that drops something in to blow it all up. It's exceedingly complex. But once you get the machinery going, it's like an X-wing fighter zooming over Tatooine. It just makes it a lot easier to work. That's what these amendments by Senator Brooks will do. And I believe that property owners who were perhaps hesitant or resistant will understand that that, as the senator said, it's voluntary, it's easy. There are steps you'll have to take. It'll require the consent of any lender that they have. But in the end, there are a lot of improvements that they can benefit from that will help them and their businesses expand, grow, and create jobs in Nevada.
Don't everybody thank me for that question at once.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. And with that, again, Senator Brooks, thank you for the voluminous amounts of revisions and working with everybody. Appreciate that. I know I had an opportunity to speak with some of the stakeholders leading to this hearing, and I know they told me that you all put in a lot of work, so I appreciate that. Thank you for getting it where we are now. So with that, we'll start off with those wishing to testify in support who are here in person. Before we go to support,
My apologies. I wanted to bring up Mr. Vanderpool who had worked on this and has some insight into all the parties involved to get to this amendment. If he could come up for a few minutes, sir.
understood. Thank you. Mr. Vanderpool, please.
Good morning, Chair, members of the committee. Nick Vanderpool with Capital Partners. Today, working on behalf of Petros Pace. So when they say the force needs to be with you, I want to take the opportunity to appreciate the following entities who provided feedback, input, and suggestions as it related to SB 283. And in no particular order, I feel what we went through probably 8 versions of SB 283 behind the scenes to get here today, including working with Ms. Sturtevant yesterday, who provided some questions and feedback, which we truly appreciate that we were able to answer. So to Director Bobzian and his team in the Governor's Office of Energy, Governor's Energy Office, the City of Reno, the City of Las Vegas, the City of Henderson, Clark County, John Swinside at Sherman and Howard and his team, Washoe County, NACO, Southern Nevada Water Authority, Nevada Bankers Association, Nevada Credit Union League, and last but not least, NV Energy. So help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi, but never tell me the odds. We were committed from the beginning to work with all these stakeholders to help Senator Brooks get SB 283 over the finish line. So I guess you can call me the R2D2 of SB 283. So thank you, Chair and committee members, for your time.
The biggest problem in the universe is that nobody helps each other, but you, my sir, brought them all together. So thank you for doing that. And with that, we'll go to those wishing to testify in support. Do we have anybody else in the room? Mr. Chauncey, good morning, sir.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Chauncey Chowdow on behalf of the Southern Nevada Water Authority. First and foremost, I want to say it's very good to see all your faces in person versus Zoom or Teams. We are in support of SB 283. Just want to say we appreciate the sponsor bringing this bill forward. Anything that deals with water efficiency and enhancing conservation in the state, we wholeheartedly support. Appreciate your time and letting me testify, and may the 4th be with you. Thank you.
And thank you. I don't see anybody else in person wishing to testify. If we could go to those via phone wishing to testify in support on Senate Bill 283.
To testify in Senate Bill 283, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller, with the last 3 digits of 948, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good morning, Chair Flores, Vice Chair Torres, and esteemed members of the committee. For the record, David Cherry, spelled David Cherry, and I am the Government Affairs Manager for the City of Henderson. Thank you for the opportunity today to testify in support of SB 238, and we appreciate Senator Brooks bringing forward this valuable legislation. The City of Henderson has made great strides in our use of clean energy and improving energy efficiency at city facilities that has not only resulted in a reduction in conventional pollutants, but also in slashing our carbon footprint and, most importantly, in creating cost savings. We also have an active CPACE program already in place that was created in 2020, and SB 238 will only enhance this important opportunity for qualifying properties so they can invest more easily in projects that will enable them to realize the benefits of clean energy, water efficiency, energy efficiency, or resiliency. This will offer significant advantages in terms of increasing potential savings, decreasing the intensity of resource use, curbing pollution, and enhancing resiliency, all of which are good for communities in a silver state like Henderson. We also appreciate the amendment allowing local governments to adopt changes that the bill will require via resolution, then by ordinance. And in the words of Master Yoda, always in motion is the future. So it is my hope that this legislation will receive the support from the committee that it deserves. Thank you.
And thank you. And with that, we'll continue with the next caller in support of Senate Bill 283.
Caller, with the last 3 digits of 294, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You may begin.
Chairman Flores and members of the committee, for the record, Callie Wilsey with the City of Reno. That's Calliwil, S as in Sam, EY. We are here in support of SB 283 today. We'd like to thank the bill sponsor for all of the outreach that occurred prior to today's hearing. There were numerous discussions, if you've heard, and we appreciate the sponsor working with us to understand our existing CPACE program and how to improve the existing language.
And thank you. Next caller in support of Senate Bill 283.
Caller, with the last 3 digits of 505, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You may begin.
Hi, this is Peter Guzman, President of the Latin Chamber of Commerce, Nevada. We want to thank Senator Brooks for sponsoring this legislation. Most importantly, this bill will aid in Nevada's recovery and foster much-needed job growth throughout the state. The financing mechanism this program provides supports numerous small businesses who have been hit the hardest over the last year. So again, we'd like to thank Senator Brooks for bringing this type of legislation forward that will help with our recovery. Thank you, Chair and committee members, for your time today. I apologize in advance that I know nothing about Star Wars, so I cannot offer much there.
Mr. Guzman, we're very disappointed in you. I'm going to move your testimony to opposition now. Next caller in support of Senate Bill 283, please.
Caller, with the last 3 digits of 716, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You may begin.
Good morning, Chair Flores and Vice Chair Torres and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Ryan Bellows, Ryan Bellows, and I am the Director of Labor and External Relations for NV Energy. NV Energy would like to testify in support of Senate Bill 283. We would like to thank Senator Brooks and the bill proponents for working with NV Energy to address the concerns that we had and to address the concerns of the other stakeholders. The revised version of the bill that was presented today addresses the concerns that we had. NV Energy supports energy efficiency as one of the solutions that will allow Nevada to meet its decarbonization goals. We offer an array of energy efficiency products and services, many of which are referenced in this bill to help all customers, including municipalities, conserve energy and lower their utility bills. We are hopeful that this bill will lead to additional investment in the state to promote energy efficiency. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us this morning. Next caller in support of Senate Bill 283.
Caller with the last three digits of 469. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You may begin.
Good morning, Chair. Andy Donahue for the record with the Labor Employers Cooperation and Education Trust, DONAHUE. I want to start by thanking the sponsor for his Senator Ness force behind this great concept. Where there's still work to do on R2 zoning, respectively, this bill can bring a new hope to much needed development. We'll also improve the projects offered, POs if you will. As the presenter indicated, there were 2 projects offered, and with this bill, we could even see 3 POs or more. Thank you again, Char Flores.
And thank you for joining us, Mr. Donahue. Next caller in support of Senate Bill 283.
Caller with the last three digits of 380. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You may begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. For the record, Kelly Crompton, Government Affairs Manager for the City of Las Vegas. It's KELLYCROMPTON. We'd like to thank Senator Brooks for bringing this bill forward and believe it is a good piece of legislation that works with the previous bill from the previous session. The City of Las Vegas has one project of the 2 that were mentioned within our jurisdiction and are currently in the works on a second project. We'd also like to thank Mr. Vanderpool for giving us the opportunity to provide a lot of feedback on the many iterations of the amendments. And a side note, it has been very entertaining to watch this hearing in my little office while you all have a wonderful May the 4th. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us this morning. Next caller in support of Senate Bill 283.
Caller with the last three digits of 068. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You may begin.
Chair, members of the committee, for the record, Aaron West with Nevada Builders Alliance. That's AARONWEST. Here today in support of the bill, and I would hope that you guys would, the committee will help facilitate this bill's jump to light speed on its way to the governor's desk. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us this morning. Next caller in support of Senate Bill 283.
For the new callers to testify in support of Senate Bill 283, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no more callers in support at this time.
Thank you. Next, we'll go with those wishing to speak in opposition to Senate Bill 283.
To testify in opposition to Senate Bill 283, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in opposition at this time.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to those wishing to testify in neutral, and we'll start off with here in the committee room. Good morning, Mr. Kane, whenever you're ready.
Chair Flores, members of the committee, my name is Connor Kane, CONNORCAIN, and I'm testifying in neutral on Senate Bill 283 on behalf of the Nevada Bankers Association. Anytime you have a financing mechanism that creates a super priority lien, it'll be met with a healthy amount of skepticism from lenders, which include the Nevada Bankers Association and others. Assemblywoman Considine, I think you touched on this from a consumer protection standpoint. That's why the lender consent that's in this bill is so critical. That's also why it's so important to limit this to commercial properties. And if we look back at 2017, when we did last work on this, there were a number of concerns about residential properties, and there were programs in other states that dealt with residential properties that did not have the best outcomes. So that's the reason for part of that skepticism and concern. I will say we're still reviewing the latest amendment, but Senator Brooks, Mr. Yaki, Mr. Vanderpool have put in an unbelievable amount of work to talk with various stakeholders including ourselves. We've met with them a number of times. They've done, I think, everything they can to try to alleviate concerns that we had, and we're very, very grateful for that. It sounds like they've, as Mr. Vanderpool said, they're on their 8th iteration, but they've managed to create a great bill. If another concern were to arise from us, we're confident we'd be able to work with them and communicate with them. And again, in conclusion, I do want to be clear: we are a neutral. And we're grateful for the opportunity to testify. And I won't punt like Mr. Guzman did. I will say that the force is certainly strong with Mr. Yaki, and also with Senator Brooks and Mr. Vanderpool. And if Mr. Vanderpool would like to be referred to as R2D2 moving forward, I'd be more than happy to satisfy that request. No problem for me or from the Bankers Association. We're happy to do that. So thank you all again for your time. Appreciate the opportunity.
Fun fact, I have an uncle named Arturito. And if you say it slow enough, you may think they're saying R2D2. I'm just saying. That is his real name. Shout out to my uncle. So we'll continue with those wishing to speak in the neutral position. We don't have anybody else present in the room, so we'll go to those wishing to call in. Neutral, please.
You're testifying in a neutral position. Please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits of 626. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You may begin.
Good morning, Chair, members of the committee. For the record, Rob Wilson, ROB, WILSON, with the Nevada Credit Union League. Here, a neutral on this bill, and we just want to align our comments with the Nevada Bankers Association and offer sincere gratitude and thanks to the sponsor of the bill, the author of the bill, as well as the contract lobbyist for the bill. They've been more than great to work with, and we appreciate it a great deal. Looking forward to the final iteration of the bill, but we believe we'll be neutral when that comes out. And I like my predecessor said, I don't want to punt this, and I just have to say I think my midichlorian count is far lower than that of Mr. Yaki's and some of the members of the committee. So I have no more Star Wars puns for you all, but I do appreciate the healthy discussions that were offered on this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. And appreciate you calling in this morning. Next caller wishing to testify in neutral on Senate Bill 283.
Caller with the last 3 digits of 978. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You may begin.
Good morning, Chair Flores, members of the committee, Joanna Jacob, JOANNA JACOB, Government Affairs Manager for Clark County. Chair Flores, we worked to move our opposition to neutral today. We're very happy to be neutral. We want to thank the proponents for working through the county concerns we conveyed in the Senate. Key amendments to for the county included the protections for the county's credit rating discussed today, the ability for the local government to define eligibility for their own program in Section 15 in their program guide, and in Section 18, the ability for a local government to provide for other matters, including any requirement related to the estimated benefit on the property. We think this is a good move towards transparency, and it was important for us not just to oppose the bill, but to work on it and provide solutions to Senator Brooks. We made Mr. Yaki crazy with all the color coding. I can personally attest to that fact. But it was important for us to work on this because earlier this year, the Clark County Board of Commissioners approved our Sustainability and Climate Action Plan under the initiative All In Clark County. We see the potential for use of this program to help further environmental and sustainable measures in our community, and the framework that is created in this bill from Senator Brooks as amended and the guidelines will allow us to work on creating a program. We intend to take this to our board for approval. So we want to thank everybody. This has been a ton of work, and I know may the force be with you and the important work that you do as it is every day. So thank you, Senator Brooks, Mr. Vanderpool, Mr. Yaki, and everybody who worked to address our county concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. And remember, to be angry is to be human. So we appreciate you working on that and working with our bill sponsor to get to the neutral position. Thank you. Next, we'll go to next caller wishing to testify in the neutral position on Senate Bill 283.
Caller with the last three digits of 863. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You may begin.
Chair Flores, members of the Assembly Committee on Government Affairs, my name is Vincent Guthreau. That's spelled Vinson. Last name is Guthreau, Guthreau. I serve as the Deputy Director of the Nevada Association of Counties, or NACO, and we are testifying neutral on SB 283. We share the thanks and appreciation for all of the work of the proponents that they put into this bill to ensure that Nevada's counties who may use PACE have the provisions that they need to make the program safe and workable, specifically making sure that counties are protected from risk, but also to provide them more flexibility and ensure that the program is easy to administer. Again, we thank the proponents for all their efforts to coordinate with counties on this legislation, and we thank the committee for the opportunity to testify today on SB 283.
And thank you for joining us. Next caller in the neutral position on 283.
Chair, there are no more callers in the neutral position at this time.
Thank you. And Senator, any closing remarks you may have?
Thank you, Chair. I don't want to beat a dead tauntaun, so I'll just go on to thank the committee and thank you for having the best committee hearing of the session.
Thank you, Senator. Again, thank you all. In all sincerity, thank you all for working on this bill and multiple revisions and finally getting everybody there. So thank you for that. We'll go ahead and close out the hearing on Senate Bill 283. And at this time, we'll go to public comment. I want to remind those of you wishing to testify during public comment that it is not a time for you to reopen a hearing, but rather for you to speak about general matters that fall within the purview of this committee. If you try to reopen a hearing, unfortunately, I'm going to have to cut you off. Broadcast, please. Next caller if we could please go to public comment.
To take place in the public comment queue, please press star 9 now. Caller with the last three digits of 556. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You may begin.
Anne Marie Grant, ANNEMARIE My brother was murdered by Reno Police and Washoe County Sheriff's Office. I think it's important for elected officials to know about bad police. Washoe County Sheriff's Office Sergeant Jason Wood is on administrative leave. After his second DUI, Sergeant Wood was arrested for DUI on Friday, April 30th. He was booked into the Washoe County Jail shortly before midnight on Friday and charged with DUI. Wood was arrested for DUI previously in March of 2016. He was sentenced to complete 9 hours of DUI school and attend a victim impact panel. He faced no apparent repercussions from the sheriff's office. In August of the same year, Sergeant Wood initiated the traffic stop of Kyle Zimbelman that resulted in Kyle's death. He was shot by multiple agencies. In 2017, Wood released his canine on a man after he surrendered to police. The video of the attack of the community member went viral, and the taxpayers of Washoe County had to foot the bill for the lawsuit. Sergeant Wood also shot and killed Robert Hampton III on 11/5/2014. Again, another death of a community member at the hands of police that Washoe County DA Chris Hicks dragged his feet on releasing his report. The report was released 5/26/2016, 568 days later. Balaam knew of Wood's past when he took office in 2018, but what was one of his first acts in office? Promoting a bad cop to sergeant. Washoe Sheriff Darren Balaam recently said it's past time we hold law enforcement officers who tarnish the profession and oath accountable for deplorable actions. It's time for him to do that within his own department. Please support bills that promote transparency and accountability from law enforcement. I also personally believe that NRS 289 needs a complete overhaul. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us this morning, ma'am, as always. Next caller wishing to testify for public comment.
For the new callers to take place in the public comment queue, please press star 9 now. Chair, the public line is open and working, but Yoda have any callers at this time?
Yes, thank you, broadcast. We appreciate you, as always. With that, we'll go ahead and close out public comment. Members, tomorrow, May 5th, we will be hearing Senate Bill 253, Senate Bill 294. Please give yourself an opportunity to review those ahead of time and reach out to some of the stakeholders and familiarize yourself with that. And I know we were originally scheduled to do our committee photo. I apologize. There was a last minute change with the photographer, and we will not be doing the photo today. That was not at the direction of any particular member. It was just a broader decision that was made external to the committee. So, members, I don't know when we will be rescheduling that. We'll just please be on the lookout. We'll send out an email to everybody. And with that, I'd like to close out with a quote. At this time in session, we find ourselves in a dark place, but just with a little more knowledge, that's going to light our way. And with that, members, may the 4th be with you.